They can throw words at you like daggers. They can give you looks that could slice through your soul. They can dismiss you, ignore you, humiliate you. And yet you can stand there still, calm, unshaken, like a mountain in the middle of a storm. Because once you learn the secret, once you grasp the shift of power that happens when you stop reacting, no one can ever control your peace again. You see, anger is not strength. Bothered isn't boldness. Reacting doesn't mean you're standing up for yourself. It often means you're giving yourself away. Every time you lose your temper, every time someone gets under your skin, you hand them the remote control to your emotions. And if they can control how you feel, they can control how you live. But there is a way out, a mindset so powerful it turns every insult into silence and every attack into dust. No one can control your emotions without your permission. That statement may seem overly simplified, even unrealistic, especially when emotions rise quickly and people around you behave in ways that feel hurtful, disrespectful, or outright cruel. But the truth is, your emotional state is yours alone to govern. It doesn't belong to the person who insulted you, dismissed you, or triggered your anger. It belongs to you. And until you fully understand and internalize that truth, you will keep living in a cycle where others dictate how you feel, how you react, and how much peace you get to keep. People may provoke you with their words, their actions, or their absence. They may show up in ways that betray, disappoint, or enrage you. But they don't own your response. They can press the button, but whether or not the machine reacts is entirely up to you. That's the ultimate freedom. Most people never claim because they're too caught up in the illusion that reacting gives them control. But in reality, every time you lose your temper, every time you explode or spiral emotionally in response to someone else's behavior, you hand over your power like a gift wrapped in your own insecurity. What makes this idea so difficult for many is that they've built their sense of identity around being reactive. They believe their anger is justified, that their reactions are proof of their self-worth. I won't let anyone disrespect me, they say, as if being bothered is a badge of honor. But reacting is not strength. It's surrender. It's the ego's desperate attempt to defend itself when it feels threatened. And the ego doesn't understand boundaries. It sees every offense as a personal attack and every disagreement as a war. But the soul knows better. The soul understands that external chaos doesn't have to become internal damage. It recognizes that emotional detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It means knowing the difference between what someone does and what you allow yourself to feel because of it. You can choose to observe people's behavior without absorbing it. You can witness their bitterness, their projections, their immaturity, and their cruelty, and still choose to remain calm, centered, and grounded. That is what it means to take back your emotional power. To reclaim the remote control that you've unknowingly handed over to others every time you allowed yourself to be triggered. And yes, it takes practice. You've probably spent years being conditioned to react. From childhood, you may have been taught that being emotionally expressive, even explosively so, is normal, even necessary. You may have believed that anger equates to being heard or respected. But emotional intelligence tells a different story. It shows you that true strength is in restraint, in composure, in the ability to stand in the storm and remain unmoved, because nothing anyone does or says has meaning until you assign meaning to it. That's the power of perception. Someone's insult may be empty words to one person, but deeply wounding to another. The difference lies not in the insult, but in the interpretation. And that interpretation is your responsibility. The sooner you recognize that no one can reach into your soul and flip the switch on your peace without your consent, the sooner you begin to live above the drama. You stop giving away pieces of yourself to people who haven't even earned your presence, let alone your energy. You begin to walk through life with an inner calm that others can't comprehend because they're still slaves to their reactions. They're still dancing to the rhythm of everyone else's tune. But once you claim your emotional autonomy, you move differently. You speak with intention. You listen with discernment. You feel deeply, but respond wisely. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. Your power lies in the fact that no matter what chaos comes your way, you are no longer owned by it. Don't personalize other people's behavior. It sounds simple, but it can change everything about how you experience life. The moment you stop thinking that every rude comment, cold shoulder, or angry outburst is about you, is the moment you begin to feel free. Because most of the time, it isn't about you. It's about them, their wounds, their insecurities, their internal storms that have nothing to do with you. But when you take things personally, you absorb their poison as if it were your truth. You begin to internalize someone else's dysfunction and carry it like it's your burden. That's not strength. That's self-betrayal. And yet so many people live this way without realizing they're letting strangers, partners, coworkers, and even family members dictate how they feel about themselves. What someone says or does is always a reflection of their inner world. If a person is angry, it's often because they haven't learned how to process their pain. If they're passive-aggressive, it's because they don't know how to communicate directly. If they constantly criticize others, it's because they're drowning in self-judgment. But none of that is yours to fix or carry. Your only job is to recognize that what comes out of them is not a mirror of your worth. It's a mirror of theirs. And when you stop interpreting their actions as attacks on you, you stop bleeding from wounds they never had the power to create in the first place. You stop reacting emotionally to things that have nothing to do with your character and everything to do with their emotional immaturity. This shift in thinking requires a deep level of emotional maturity. It demands that you step outside of your ego and understand that the world doesn't revolve around you, not even in the negative ways. That person who snapped at you in the hallway might have had a fight with their spouse. The coworker who rolled their eyes may be battling depression. The friend who suddenly went cold may be consumed with their own self-doubt. But when you make their behavior about you, you suffer twice. Once from their actions and once from your interpretation of those actions. You replay the moment in your head, searching for what you did wrong, trying to decode their silence, questioning your worth. That cycle is toxic. And the only way to end it is to see people's behavior for what it really is, a projection. Not everything needs a reaction. Not every silence is rejection. Not every tone is condemnation. Sometimes people are just lost in their own minds, wrapped in their own issues, and they cross your path carrying energy that doesn't belong to you. If you pick it up and hold it close, you begin to identify with something that was never yours to begin with. And that's how you lose your peace. But when you detach from the need to personalize every interaction, you begin to live lighter. You realize that people's moods are not your responsibility. Their attitudes are not your assignment. Their chaos is not your crisis. You can witness it without owning it. This doesn't mean you allow people to treat you poorly. It means you recognize their behavior as information, not a definition of your value. You can set boundaries. You can walk away. You can choose your response with clarity instead of confusion. That is power. That is freedom. When someone says something unkind, you don't have to internalize it. You can let it pass through you like wind. You can say to yourself, that's about them, not me, and move on. Because the truth is, most of the pain we feel in relationships doesn't come from the other person. It comes from the way we've learned to interpret their actions. Once you break that pattern, you begin to live with a kind of peace that can't be shaken. You stop fighting battles that were never yours. You stop carrying stories that were never true. You stop being pulled into emotional storms that aren't meant for you. And in doing so, you reclaim yourself fully, deeply, and unapologetically. The actions hand your power away. It might feel like standing up for yourself when you lash out, raise your voice, or fire back at someone's insult. But in reality, you're giving them exactly what they wanted: control over your emotional state. Every time you react from a place of anger, frustration, or defensiveness, you're responding to their behavior on their terms, not yours. You're no longer acting with intention, you're acting out of impulse. And that's when the power balance shifts. That's when you've stepped out of self-mastery and into emotional slavery. Because whoever can provoke you owns you. Whoever can trigger you controls you. And the more you react, the more you reinforce the idea that your peace is fragile and up for grabs. People who know how to manipulate, control, or dominate others often rely on emotional reactions. They don't need to be physically aggressive or even verbally abusive. All they need to do is push the right button. And if you respond exactly how they hoped, they win. They feel powerful because you gave them access to something sacred, your emotional center. That center should be guarded like treasure, but most people leave it wide open. They wear their triggers like neon signs. They walk into conversations waiting to be offended, expecting to be dismissed, prepared to explode. That's not emotional strength, that's emotional exposure. When you stop reacting, something powerful begins to happen. You start choosing your responses. You start approaching situations with clarity instead of chaos. You start seeing what's really going on beneath the surface. That person who insulted you isn't strong. They're insecure. That coworker who undermined you isn't confident. They're threatened. That partner who constantly picks fights isn't bold. They're emotionally immature. But when you react, you validate their behavior. You confirm that they can control the room with their attitude. You make it about them. And worse, you make yourself small in the process. The most powerful people in any room are the calmest ones. Not because they don't feel anything, but because they've trained themselves to own their emotions instead of being owned by them. You can have fire in your soul and still be calm in your response. You can feel every insult and still choose not to let it drive your behavior. That's what it means to be emotionally powerful, not reacting to every attack, but rising above it, observing it, and deciding if it even deserves your energy. When you react without thinking, you become predictable. And when you're predictable, you're easy to manipulate. Toxic people love predictable reactions. They love knowing exactly what will get under your skin. They love seeing you spiral because it affirms their belief that they can control you. But the moment you stop playing that game, the moment your reactions turn into calm, calculated silence, they lose that grip. They don't know what to do with someone who won't play emotional ping pong. They don't know how to attack someone who doesn't flinch. This doesn't mean you stay silent forever. It doesn't mean you suppress your emotions. It means you pause, you think, you choose, you reclaim your response as yours and yours alone. You stop letting others dictate the rhythm of your emotional world. And in that space of pause, you find power. Real, grounded power. The kind of power that doesn't need to shout or argue or explode. It just exists. Quiet, steady, untouchable. That's the kind of power that can't be faked. And it only comes to those who have mastered the art of not reacting just because someone else demands it. It comes to those who know how to protect their peace like it's the most valuable thing they own. Because it is. Silence and stillness are powerful responses. They are not signs of weakness or avoidance, but symbols of mastery. In a world where everyone wants to be louder, faster, and more reactive, silence is disruptive. It unsettles people who thrive on chaos and confrontation. When you choose not to engage, when you decide that something isn't worth your breath, you send a message that is louder than any words could ever be. It says, I'm in control. I choose peace. I'm not giving you access to my energy. That's not avoidance. That's discipline. That's emotional elegance. And very few people ever learn how to live from that space. We've been conditioned to think that silence is surrender, that if you don't respond, you're weak or afraid. But the truth is, silence is the tool of those who understand that not every insult deserves a reply. Not every challenge needs a fight, and not every situation requires your presence. Sometimes the most powerful move is to do nothing, to observe, to wait, to walk away. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. When you stop feeding into other people's emotional chaos, they're forced to sit with it alone. And that's when the real mirror shows up. That's when they realize you're not available to be their emotional punching bag anymore. Stillness is presence. It's what separates those who are reactive from those who are grounded. When you can sit in the middle of provocation and choose not to respond, you're showing that you have nothing to prove. You're not controlled by ego. You're not moved by someone else's instability. You've learned how to sit with yourself, and because of that, you don't need to fight every battle or chase every confrontation. You become like a mountain strong, unmoved, watching storms pass without ever crumbling. That is a force few can match. When someone attacks you and you respond with silence, they're left to wrestle with their own noise. They're left wondering why their words didn't work, why their tactics didn't shake you. That confusion is a powerful lesson. And often, it's the only way certain people begin to face their own behavior. Because when you shout back, you give them an excuse. You become part of the chaos. But when you stay quiet, the spotlight stays on them. And without a distraction, they're left alone with the weight of what they've done. This isn't about playing games or trying to manipulate. It's about honoring your peace. You've spent enough time over-explaining, defending, and proving your worth to people who were never really listening. You don't need to keep doing that. You don't need to waste words on ears that are committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to keep putting energy into situations that only drain you. Silence is how you preserve your power. Stillness is how you stay connected to who you are when the world is trying to pull you in 1,000 directions. People don't expect silence. They expect a fight. They expect to push a button and watch you unravel. When that doesn't happen, when you hold your ground without needing to speak, you change the dynamic. You stop being someone they can control. You become someone they have to respect, even if they never say it, because deep down, people know when they're in the presence of someone who has mastered themselves. It's felt in your posture, in your eyes, in your stillness. That kind of presence can't be faked. It comes from experience, from pain, from growth, and from the decision to stop giving every situation your voice. Silence and stillness are not emptiness. They are strength under control. They are restraint guided by wisdom. And once you begin to operate from that place, you no longer feel the need to be reactive. You let the world spin around you while you remain rooted. You let others waste their breath while you protect yours. Because your peace is not just a feeling, it's your strategy, your boundary, your greatest form of self-respect. Master the pause between trigger and response. That space may seem small, but it holds the key to your emotional freedom. When something upsets you, when a person says something hurtful or does something that pushes your buttons, your natural instinct is to react instantly. That reaction might come in the form of anger, sarcasm, defensiveness, or tears. It's fast, impulsive, and often regrettable. But if you can learn to pause just for a few seconds, you create a gap wide enough for wisdom to enter. You give yourself the power to choose how to respond instead of allowing your emotions to hijack your behavior. And in that moment, you regain control of your story. Reactivity is like muscle memory. You've trained yourself to respond a certain way for years, maybe decades. Someone disrespects you and your voice raises. Someone ignores you and your heart closes. Someone challenges you and you fight back. But none of those responses are chosen. They're automatic. They're programmed by past pain, ego, and emotion. That's why they often lead to regret. You say something you didn't mean. You act out in a way that doesn't reflect who you are. And afterward, you feel drained, ashamed, or even embarrassed. Not because of what the other person did, but because of how you responded. The pause is where maturity lives. It's where growth shows up. It doesn't mean you don't feel the heat rising inside you. It means you feel it and still choose to breathe instead of explode. You notice the tension building, but instead of letting it erupt, you ground yourself, you slow down, you reflect, you ask, what's the best response here? Not the loudest, not the fastest, but the wisest. That is power. And it's not something most people do naturally. It takes effort. It takes rewiring your nervous system to stop rushing toward reaction and start seeking intentional response. This pause also reveals your emotional patterns. If you keep getting triggered by the same type of situation or person, the pause gives you space to notice that. Maybe you always feel disrespected when someone interrupts you. Maybe you always feel abandoned when someone is distant. The pause helps you ask yourself, why does this affect me so deeply? That awareness is priceless because once you understand your triggers, they stop owning you. You begin to heal the wound beneath them instead of lashing out every time it gets touched. It's easy to think that strong people react quickly, that if someone attacks, you must defend instantly to protect yourself. But real strength is measured in restraint. The strongest person in the room is the one who can hear criticism, endure disrespect, and still respond with dignity. They don't let someone else's chaos dictate their character. They stay rooted, and they get there by mastering the pause. Over time, this practice becomes second nature. You begin to notice a shift in how you handle conflict. You don't yell as easily. You don't jump to conclusions. You don't send that angry message right away. You wait, you process, you protect your peace before you protect your pride. That's what emotional maturity looks like. And the beauty is, no one even has to know you're doing it. You could be in the middle of a heated moment, and while the other person is losing control, you're breathing, grounding, choosing. That invisible pause is your armor. It keeps you from being dragged into battles that don't deserve your energy. The world is full of people who are reactive, impulsive, and emotionally undisciplined. But you don't have to be one of them. You can be the person who brings calm into chaos, who responds instead of reacts, who thinks before speaking. And that starts with something as simple and powerful as a pause. In that small moment, everything changes. Not just the conversation, but your entire direction. Because you're no longer letting life push you around. You're guiding it with clarity, grace, and strength. Inner healing creates emotional immunity. The more unresolved pain you carry, the more sensitive you become to the behavior of others. You're not reacting to the present moment. You're reacting to an old wound that was never given the chance to heal. When someone disrespects you, it might remind you of the time your voice was ignored as a child. When someone abandons you, it might trigger the memory of being left by someone you trusted. These emotional injuries get stored deep within you, and unless you bring them to the surface and deal with them, they continue to dictate how you feel, how you respond, and how much peace you can maintain in the face of adversity. Healing doesn't just make you feel better, it makes you stronger. It turns you into someone who is no longer shaken by surface-level disrespect or petty provocations, because you've cleared out the internal clutter that used to magnify every offense. People often think that being calm, grounded, and emotionally detached comes from pretending not to care or developing a thick skin. But real emotional immunity doesn't come from suppressing feelings. It comes from processing them. It comes from having the courage to sit with your pain, your fears, your abandonment wounds, your trust issues, and facing them head on instead of hiding behind anger or defensiveness. It means asking yourself why certain things hurt so much and being willing to unpack the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. That work isn't glamorous, but it's necessary, because when you do the work to heal the root, the surface doesn't shake you anymore. You start to realize that most of your emotional reactions weren't really about other people. They were about the parts of you that felt unseen, unheard, unworthy, or unloved. And as long as those parts remain unhealed, they will hijack your peace every time someone brushes against them. But when you go back and give those wounded parts what they've always needed, validation, acceptance, compassion, you begin to take back control. You're no longer looking for the world to affirm you because you've already affirmed yourself. You're no longer waiting for someone to make you feel safe because you've become your own safety. That's what emotional immunity really is, not being numb, but being secure enough within that the outside world can no longer destabilize you. Healing makes you see people differently too. When you're hurt, you see everyone as a threat. But when you're healed, you see clearly. You understand that some people are projecting, some are in pain, and some simply don't know better. And instead of reacting with anger, you respond with understanding, or you don't respond at all. Either way, you protect your energy because your healing has taught you that peace is too valuable to trade for temporary drama. The more you heal, the more peaceful your life becomes, not because people stop being difficult, but because you stop needing their behavior to validate your worth. You stop clinging to their approval or fearing their rejection. You trust yourself. You trust your boundaries. You trust your choices. And most importantly, you trust your inner stability. That inner stability is what allows you to stay calm when things go wrong, to stay kind when people are unkind, to stay strong when life gets heavy. It's not about being perfect or emotionless. It's about being anchored. And anchors don't get tossed around in storms. They hold steady. Healing is a journey, not a switch. But every step you take toward understanding yourself, forgiving your past, and letting go of what no longer serves you is a step toward becoming untouchable in the best possible way, not because you've built walls, but because you've built roots. You've planted yourself so deeply in self-awareness, self-love, and self-respect that nothing and no one can uproot you. And that is the ultimate emotional immunity, resilience that radiates from the inside out.